At this time, I am going to tell you the story of how I met my all-time favorite band, The Clash. And I got their autographs. Look at that. One of my most prized possessions. So when I was younger, my dad wasn't too well, and I had to learn how to drive the car as quickly as I could. So old enough to drive, get your driver's license, you gotta learn how to drive. So I had access to my dad's car. I had to help out with taking him back and forth to the doctors and get groceries and stuff like that. Family just needed me to drive, so I lucked out. I did that, and I had access to my dad's car when I needed it. So the kids in the neighborhood were going to see the Clash at the Cape Cod Coliseum down on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And they knew at the time there was no way to get there other really than by car. That was the best way to go. And it's a long walk from Boston. So the kids I hung out with, they got tickets to see the Clash. They were getting tickets. And one of them said to me, "If we get you a ticket, will you drive us to the show? Can you take your dad's car and can you take us there?" And I said, "Yeah." Well, I didn't ask my dad, but I asked him later. I said, "Look, can I take the car to go down to Cape Cod to this show we want to go to?" And my dad said, "Yeah, sure, that's fine." So me and my next door neighbor, who I was hanging out with at the time, got me the ticket, and I didn't realize that he had all these other kids who he had promised that I would take. So we're driving around the city where we lived, picking everybody up, and I had a car full of kids. Some of them I knew, some of them I didn't know, and all piled in my dad's car. We drove to Cape Cod, and this was a matinee show. It was like an afternoon show, late afternoon. And we got there and went to the parking lot, and lots and lots of people. Everybody's excited about seeing the Clash. And we go out and we went into the arena. And this was a general admission thing where you didn't have assigned seats. It was just a big coliseum. Inside, it had a roof on it, it wasn't outdoors, and just packed in the floor. Well, as soon as I went in, I immediately lost all the kids I went with. They dispersed. I had no idea where they were, and I ended up watching the show from the floor next to a great guy who kind of protected me the whole time because, you know, I'm not a giant, but this guy was a giant, and he looked after me and let me hold my space so I didn't get knocked out and I could see the show really well. What I remember of the show was it was a really bad sound. Like it was just kind of like whoa, like I couldn't distinguish anything. It was pretty bad sound, but they were up there. It was the Clash. I couldn't believe it. All right, show ends, and everyone leaves the venue, and I go out to the parking lot, and I'm at my dad's car, and none of the kids I went with have come back out yet. I don't know where they are. So I go, okay, I must be the first one out. And I'm waiting, and a lot of cars are leaving the parking lot. And pretty soon, I was like the last car in the parking lot. And I began to get worried, like, I don't know what's happening here. So this was 1982-ish, before most of you were born. It was a different time. Well, I went back into the venue, and I went into the space where I was for the show, and nobody was around. And I walked up to the stage, and to the right of the stage was a police officer. And I went over to him and I said, "I've lost my friends. I'm not sure where they are. Do you mind if I go backstage and take a look around for them?" And you know what he said? "Sure, go ahead." I couldn't believe it. I said thank you, and I went right around, and suddenly I was behind the stage. I was backstage at the Cape Cod Coliseum, looking for my friends. It's very institutional back there. Cinder block walls, all painted, and brown metal doors. And so I'm roaming around in there, and all of a sudden, around the corner comes this kid who I went with, Rich. Rich comes around the corner out of nowhere. And he goes, "Come on, we're meeting the Clash." I'm like, "What the heck?" So he says, so I followed him, and he took me into the men's room. I'm like, "What are we doing in here? No Clash in here, just me and you." He said, "Take some of this paper towel." So we ripped off paper towel from a roll of paper towel. He goes, "Grab some paper towel, come on." He ripped off a length, I ripped off a length, and he burst back out into the corridor. Of course, I was following him, and somehow he magically found his way back to this nondescript, crazy room through this maze of back alleyways inside the Cape Cod Coliseum. He opened the door, and there was a Clash. I couldn't believe it. The Clash was sitting right inside this room. And I went in with Rich and closed the door behind him. Now it was just the band, a few women who were probably their girlfriends or something, and like 2 other people. And the kids all the kids I went with were there, just them. And it was very unbelievable. So Topper, the drummer, was not with them on that tour. He needed to take a break. So Terry Chimes was there, Mick Jones, Paul Simonon, and Joe Strummer, of course. My guy. He was in there, and I got to meet him. So I followed Rich around. He was handing the piece of paper to the band, and first he went to Mick Jones, and I'm right behind, and now I'm realizing why we needed the piece of paper. This kid Rich was brilliant. Hello, Rich. Thank you for everything. And so Mick Jones signed the paper for me, and then Paul Simonon, and then I went over to Joe Strummer, and I gave him this piece of paper, and he signed it for me. And then over to Terry Chimes, who was playing drums for them at the time. I was just stunned. This is my favorite band in the world, and I actually got to meet them. They're still my favorite band. So I had a quick conversation with the drummer, Terry Chimes, who was absolutely wonderful. And if you ever hear these things about how cool the band was to their fans, that was true. They were absolutely wiped out from the show they had put on for us. They gave everything on stage. There was nothing left. They were basically out of water, out of food, and out of energy. And they were kind enough to let us hang out with them for a little while. So I had a good conversation with Terry Chimes. Thank you, Terry Chimes. And I got to meet Joe and Paul and Mick. And not too long after that, someone, probably their road manager or something, came in sort of clapping his hands and said, okay, everybody out. Everybody who's not a band member has to get out. And me and the kids that I went to school with were ushered out. Then we went back through the Coliseum, and outside it was still daylight. And it was August. It was pretty hot. So we got back to my dad's car and drove back from Cape Cod to Boston. So I wanted to share that story. I don't have too many stories like that, but this is just one of the best ones, and it's so wonderful. Sometimes people say you don't want to meet your heroes. I get that. It's probably true in some cases. But in this case, I got to meet the band that meant the most to me, and I'm grateful to the kids who got me the ticket, grateful to Rich for seeing me and pulling me in. And that's it. So I just wanted to share that story. If you don't have the Clash album, get yourself London Calling, get yourself Sandinista. Any of the Clash albums are great, and check out their music. All right, people. Here comes the public service announcement. I need you to be kind to one another. Be patient with one another. You're the adult. It's a teaching moment. Show people how to respond. If people get angry, just step aside or help calm them down. We've got enough chaos in the world. What we need is more great music. So maybe you'll start a band. Get your energy out that way. All right, off I go. Thank you. Bye.